Specifically, the Commerce Clause says that Congress has the power to regulate commerce among the several states. So right away, just looking at the text, it seems that there's two requirements that a regulation must meet if it is to be constitutional under the Commerce Clause. One is it has to regulate commerce, and secondly, that commerce must be interstate. Now, the individual mandate flunks both of these requirements. Not having health insurance is not commerce, and it's also not interstate. Now, this sort of common sense textual interpretation of the Constitution, it is borne out, I think, by the structure and original meaning and the rest of the text of the Constitution. If you instead interpret the Commerce Clause as giving Congress the power to do anything that might have some significant economic effect, then most of the other powers of Congress would, as David Rifkin said, be rendered completely redundant. For example, in the very same phrase where Congress is given the power to regulate interstate commerce, it's also given the power to regulate foreign commerce and commerce with the Indian tribes. Now, those other two kinds of commerce clearly have an effect on interstate commerce, so if the interstate commerce gave Congress the power to regulate or do anything that has some kind of effect on interstate commerce, you wouldn't need these other two powers, nor would you need most of the other 17 powers assigned to Congress in Article 1 of the Constitution. Sort of framers could have saved themselves the trouble of writing most of what was in the Constitution. It was a long, hot summer in Philadelphia in 1787. They could instead have gone to the beach and cooled themselves and saved themselves the trouble of writing most of what they said there. I would note also that this is more or less the way that the Supreme Court interpreted the Constitution throughout the first 150 years or so of our history. Walter Dellinger mentioned the 1824 case of Gibbons versus Ogden. In that case, Chief Justice Marshall actually mentioned a whole bunch of things that he said were not within the scope of Congress's commerce power. Among those things he mentioned were inspection laws, quarantine laws, and perhaps most relevant for us, health laws of every description, in which category I think the individual mandate perhaps falls. So during the first 150 years of our history, this sort of textual interpretation of Commerce Clause by and large was followed. Now, I fully recognize that in the 60 or 70 years since then, since the 1930s, the Supreme Court has expanded the scope of the commerce power, but it has still not expanded it anywhere near far enough to cover this case. Probably the broadest ever Commerce Clause decision was Gonzalez versus Raich. By the way, I think a terrible decision where the Supreme Court 5 years ago or 6 years ago said that Congress has the power to forbid the possession and growth of medical marijuana, even if it was never sold anywhere. But even in that case, the court said that they upheld this because this was economic activity, and they define economic activity as, quote, the production, consumption, or distribution of a commodity. Well, not having health insurance, it's not producing a commodity, it's certainly not distributing a commodity, and obviously it's not consuming a commodity, rather it's choosing not to consume it.